Hello, students. So today we're going to do a little lesson about irony, a review of irony, and then satire. And we're going to talk about how it's going to apply to our next unit and some of the things we're going to read. So first, let's talk about irony. So the overarching main definition of irony is it's something that happens where there is a discrepancy or like a difference or a disconnect between what is expected and what is real. So a discrepancy between expectation and reality. So let's look at these comics here. So if you look at the one on the left, it's ironic because we expect the prison inmate to get free. But in reality, he's going to get himself in a worse situation, right? Because this is an outhouse, right? Before indoor toilets. And so he's about to dig into the human waste, gross, right? Beneath the outhouse, beneath the toilet, and that causes humor and disgust and shock, right? On the right hand side, this is also humorous. This is situational irony because when something posts always open, we think of like a 24-hour Walmart, for example, but then it says close. That's ironic because we expect that something that is advertising itself as always being open to be open, but instead it is closed. So there are three types of irony. First is situational irony. And this is when there's a difference between what the audience expects to happen in a story and then what actually happens in that story. So, for example, after dedicating his life to healthy eating and exercise, the fitness instructor died of a heart attack while jogging. That situation is ironic because we would expect someone who dedicates their life to being healthy to maybe die of old age as opposed to dying of the healthy exercise that they do. Second is verbal irony. So, this is when a person says something, but they mean the opposite. This is known as sarcasm. Often it's humorous. So, if I'm like, oh, what lovely weather we're having this week, a Tarv said in an annoyed voice as the rain soaked through his new shoes. So, if he's standing in the rain, he says, what lovely weather. He's annoyed, he's sarcastic. That's verbal irony. Finally, the third definition of irony, the third type of irony is dramatic irony. This is when readers or viewers of a film know what's in store for a character, but the character doesn't know. So, like, I might know that there's a guy with a chainsaw or a knife hiding behind a tree and someone's walking towards that tree, but the character doesn't know. And that can create humor, it can create suspense, it can create shock. Here's another example. In the movie Jaws, the audience hears the scary music. They see that shark fin moving towards the swimmers, but the swimmers are blissfully unaware of what's about to happen. They have no idea. Okay, so three types: situational, verbal, and dramatic irony. So, why is irony important in stories and movies? Well, it can create humor. It can create suspense. It can shock the reader, which we like being shocked as readers or viewers of a film. And it can affect the mood of the story. Let's look at an example here. Think about this heart-wrenching scene in The Lion King. Hopefully you've seen the old cartoon or the newer one. And this is where Simba mourns the death of his father because his father dies. And Simba mourns the death of his father for years. He blames himself. He thinks the wildebeests were stampeding through the canyon because of his own actions. But the audience actually knows from this scene right here that Scar is responsible for causing Mufasa's death. And our knowledge of what really is happening makes his death even more tragic. It causes the audience to feel really bad for Simba, to pity Simba, and it also causes us to hate Scar, and it makes him this excellent villain. So it affects the mood of the story. It changes the viewer's understanding of the plot. All right, so now we're going to talk about satire, which is actually a genre of literature. So satire is a genre of literature in which the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule, it's used to expose and criticize the stupidity and foolishness of people, governments, political entities, organizations, beliefs, and more. So these are some really famous satires like Shrek, the television show The Office. This is an image from the short story called Harrison Bergeron. These are all well-known satires. All right, I'm using Screencastify, and on Screencastify, you cannot show video because it won't record the audio. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have you pause this video, and I want you to go to slide 6 of the slideshow that is available to you on Schoology. Okay, go to slide 6 of the slideshow, and you're going to press play, and I want you to watch this video clip for a second. As you're watching, I want you to consider these questions. 1, what people, things, beliefs, organizations, etc. are being ridiculed or criticized? 2, what could be a hidden theme or message from this clip in Shrek be? And then when you've thought about what's being ridiculed, what's being criticized, what could a theme be, come back to this video. Okay, so press pause, come back, and I'm going to keep doing the lesson. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second. Go watch the Shrek video on slide 6 of the satire presentation on Schoology, and then come back and finish watching this video. Keep it open, don't close it. Okay, so now I'm assuming you have watched the Shrek video clip and you saw Fiona, fighting the robbers, the thieves in an unexpected way. And so you were supposed to be thinking about what was being ridiculed, what was being criticized, what could be a theme. Well, let's break it down into some categories. I know this is a lot to read. Okay, so let's start at the top here. Exaggeration, incongruity, like things that don't seem to belong, reversal, and a word called parody. These are all techniques that satires use to poke fun at or criticize someone or something in order to make a point or reveal a truth. So let's read the definitions of each term below, and then we'll talk about how they're used in the movie Shrek. So exaggeration, right? That's when something is represented as much better or much worse or much bigger or much smaller than it actually is. So in this clip, Princess Fiona fights and successfully defeats Robin Hood and all of the merry men, right? Because they're, think they're thieves or something. And she does it without any help and without any weapons. It's a little exaggerated, her abilities. Second, incongruity. This is when something's out of place, something that doesn't fit the location or the situation or the time period. It doesn't belong there. So Princess Fiona uses her ponytail to deliver a knockout punch to one of the merry men. While she's frozen in midair and she does this martial arts kick, Princess Fiona pauses to fix her disheveled hair before knocking out the two merry men. So that's wouldn't belong. It kind of defies the laws of gravity. Third, reversal, a change in the opposite direction, position, or course of action. I'm guessing a lot of you picked up on this one. So satire uses reversal. We would expect the damsel in distress to need help, right? But here, the roles of the hero and the damsel in distress have been reversed. In this clip, it's Princess Fiona, the rescuee, Shrek is supposedly rescuing her, who fights and defeats the enemy. Finally, parody. Parody is like an imitation of the style of a particular writer, artist, or genre, and it uses deliberate exaggeration for comedic effect, for comic effect. So the fight scene is exaggerated imitation of the martial arts style and special effects that you see in movies like The Matrix or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon or Jackie Chan films. It's kind of an exaggeration, it uses that same style and pokes fun at that style. So this is not a very deep satire, but it does kind of poke fun at typical fairy tale portrayals of women and how they need help, and typical fairy tale portrayals of the hero and what the typical hero would look like, even what the typical villain would look like. And it kind of pokes fun at that and criticizes that in a humorous way. Now, many satires are dark. They're not all comedic. But Shrek happens to be a funny satire. Just like The Office, the television show, if you're familiar with that, makes fun of and exaggerates what office culture might look like in many companies. Okay, so let's talk about a couple satires. So I mentioned The Office. Maybe you haven't seen it, maybe you have, maybe your parents have watched it. This is a satirical documentary, or what we call a mockumentary, and it's about the office place. It pokes fun at the boring and mundane lives of people who work in a normal office setting and how sometimes people take themselves a little too seriously. That's one of the themes of the show. Then we've got the movie Shrek, right? It pokes fun at the traditional story of the knight who rescues the damsel in distress and how that type of a story isn't really realistic. It's not a realistic depiction of the roles filled by men and women in modern society. It also pokes fun at, like I just mentioned, traditional fairy tale characters, and it parodies other popular movies. So then we have this movie called The Truman Show, which we're going to start watching in a couple days. Now, while The Office and The Shrek are more comedic satires, The Truman Show, I wouldn't call it dark, but it's more serious. It's a more serious satire that shows how careless the media can be, while criticizing the power and the influence that the media has on our lives. People love to criticize the media, and you hear phrases fake news, but also we consume media all the time, so it's ironic. So we're going to start this movie in a few days. I'm very excited for you to navigate this satire and learn about this new genre and think about what truths this movie is trying to tell us and how it can affect how things like the media can affect our own realities, and sometimes how the border or the line between reality and fiction is a little bit hazy. And we'll talk more about it in the future.